It's been encouraging to read about that and talk about that with you because let's be honest, the sector has been a bit of a laggard, hasn't it? In many respects. I mean, I've heard stories in the past of data center managers, energy managers, almost being incentivized by the amount of power they use rather than the reduction of power, which would seem a much more sensible incentive from my perspective.
Well, I've mused on that myself because I even tested that theory out, and it does feel like the sales organizations in some data centers are being they're using the amount of power that's been sold as almost a metric for how valuable a customer they've managed to snare, because more power equals a more powerful, more data-centric powerful solution.
But you're seeing clear evidence now that purchasers are looking at decarbonisation and net zero as one of the decision-making elements when they're going out for proposals.
I think so, and I think that's going to be supported, is maybe the word, by energy prices, which obviously at the moment are starting to soar for all sorts of different reasons, which we don't want to go into necessarily here, but definitely it's underpinned by a financial incentive as well as a sustainability incentive. One thing I did want to talk about though is one challenge that we can't solve as SoftIron, but as an industry we need to really look at is there's almost a delineation between the data center operations people, so the people that are literally responsible for running the facility and providing power and cooling and all those things, and the organizations, the IT operations people that put the product into the racks and are responsible for its operation. Historically, I think the data center operations guys are focused on how efficient can I make the data center, and the IT operations people are focused on how they just want the power and the cooling they need to do the job because the products they've been using are fundamentally the same, or in terms of their power requirements at least. And those two organizations haven't really thought cohesively and more holistically about how they could work together. And it's underpinned by a metric. We talked about metrics earlier and ratios, something called PUE. PUE is essentially the total amount of power being consumed by the operation and the percentage of that which is being consumed by what's in the rack as opposed to the facility itself, and trying to reduce that ratio to as close to 1 as you possibly can, and that being the most efficient. But what it doesn't do, obviously it's a ratio, so it doesn't say actually I'm trying to reduce the absolute amount of power I'm consuming, it's just I'm trying to create the most efficient environment for the amount of power which is required. And I think that's a real, I'd love to see some progress on that in the next.
Well, that is the fundamental challenge, isn't it? So when we look at you in your sector from an investment perspective, I mean, we're very excited at the fact, obviously, that the digital economy is growing exponentially, you could say, and will continue to into the future as the digital economy becomes a much more significant part of the global economy. But the fundamental challenge is really there, that this is an energy intensive sector that needs to reduce its energy burden as it grows and needs to decarbonise. I mean, and that's why we think you have a pretty unique opportunity with your product design and approach to play a fundamental role in the decarbonisation of the sector. And as we've sort of discussed, I mean, your savings, the avoided emissions of using your equipment are really emissions that are helping your client companies to decarbonise their own operational footprint.